What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the podcast. We got a fun one. I'm excited about this one today. We got a little Dynasty Forecast episode. We're going to be talking about 25, 26, 27 NFL draft classes. Me and Jay kind of did a comprehensive breakdown of the talent of the next 3 years. We graded it out. We looked at every position. We graded it out, kind of. I get told in Discord all the time, your math is terrible because I was a history teacher. But we graded out the positions. We're looking at, hey, if you're rebuilding, where are those classes that you should target wide receiver? 2027 class. Where are the quarterbacks at? Going through there, we have a bunch of player rankings. We also have dynasty values for you. So we're going to be looking at pick values comparable to their NFL counterparts. So what's a 2025 first worth? Is it worth Garrett Wilson? Where are we leaning there heading into the offseason, the dynasty season now? And now they're wrapping up to championships next week. So hit that like and subscribe button. Hang with us till the intro is done. And we're diving into the Dynasty Forecast. All right, we're starting with quarterback. So let's start there. 2025 class. We're not very excited about this group, but what you'll see on the screen if you are watching on YouTube, essentially it's going to have our rankings and it's going to have our TDR trade value. So in our Patreon, we have a trade calculator Jay built and Christian also helped out, kind of. I give Jay more credit there. And essentially it helps basically give us value for college guys and NFL guys, if you are in like a Devy league, if you are in a Dynasty League 2 combined, just to see where these guys are getting valued. So that's what you see in that column, the TDR trade value. And then you have your class, like, hey, what class are they in, their school, and the quarterback. Then you have your average. Now, before I get the math guys yelling at me, the spreadsheet nerds. So the average says 72.7, but we give it a C+ because the depth also. So we are going to be diving into other quarterbacks in the class, but we just took like the top guys at the position to kind of talk about, and then we're going to kind of go deeper in there. Now, if you listen to the podcast, we obviously will tell you guys. So in the 25 class right now, we give it a C+, but it is a very curved C+ because I have a hard time with this group. Right now, why we say it's curved is because we have Drew Aller still there. Now, Drew Aller, he's kind of flirted with going back to school or not. It came out reports that he was going back, and then he kind of had this weird statement like it wasn't really like he was coming out or not. And so I think it's unknown. I think it really depends on how well Penn State does. He looked okay against SMU, nothing crazy in this last playoff game. But if they make it to the championship game, there could be a spot where Drew Aller says, hey, I'm coming out now. So we have him in here. So his TDR trade value is 81, partly ballooned because of Jay and Christian. But then you have Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. So that kind of wraps up the top three for us here. Anything to say about these three guys, Jay?
Yeah, I think Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders look like first-round picks. And anytime you're getting first-round picks in Superflex, that's exciting. What I'd say is, though, the caliber of tier is not high in terms of what I look for in terms for potential differentiated QB play in the future. And that's not to say that they don't get it. Just my probability of them hitting that differentiated level is a little bit lower. When Drew, if everything is kind of goes according to what we're seeing now for Drew Aller, if he's not in this 2025 class and he moves to the 2026 class, that changes the makeup of how this class looks. So that's that interesting part of this. We're going to look at the depth here, but Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, they look okay. When you and the 68 that we have there in terms of trade value, that you'll find out where that kind of puts us in there. But that's obviously we have Drew Aller all the way up in the 80s, and that's we view as the differentiated guy. So that's really a driver of how kind of we're viewing that class.
That's where you get those curves, right? So like that's where I'm sitting there. If you need a quarterback and you look at dynasty rankings, you're trying to think about guys in that, in that 12 to 18 range, right? Let's say Aller's out. Let's just put Aller, say, hey, whatever. Look at Shedeur and Ward right now. It really comes down to probably like Bo Nix is sitting there at QB 12, Brock at QB 14, Goff at QB 16. I'd rather all three of those guys probably than Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, possibly. Maybe. Bo's the one that kind of gives me, but he's looked good. Like I can't keep hating on Bo Nix because he's looked good there. Where do you draw the line? Anthony Richardson's at QB 19, Tua's at QB 20. Or actually, where would you put Cam Ward and Shedeur in your rankings?
So I have this prospect model that I just went through, and I put tiers out for these guys. So Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders fell into tier 3 for me and how I rank the QBs, which last year, if you go back to last year, I had it as Bo Nix is kind of my level of where tier 3 would be, as these are just as prospects. So this is your sort of probability of success coming out based on what you did in college. And it's basically, kind of fits him into that sort of trajectory, that Bo Nix area. Now, Bo Nix went and is doing really well and performing really well. So that doesn't mean you can't come into be a tier 3 guy and not come into the NFL and do really well. I would just have a lower probability of him being that guy that offers you the 20 plus points, fantasy points per game, that the Josh Allens, Lamar Jacksons, those type of guys that time in and time out win you fantasy championships. That's not what I see. I see more of the Bo Nix who gets you that like back end QB1 sometimes, and that's serviceable, but not that differentiated performance that you can see from some of the other players.
Yeah, no, 100%. I understand that. Now let's get into the class a little bit depth here. Quinn Ewers is out there, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Carson Beck, Cade Klubnik, Will Howard, Kyron Drones, Curtis Ward, Kyle McCord, Josh Hoover, Brady Cook. A lot of guys on the list here. I think the one that if I was going to pivot to, Quinn is the one where you and me talked pre-show about how he came out his senior year of high school and is actually a freshman at Ohio State and he sat. So when you think of him, really, it's 3 years. Like people think of him being in college for a long time, but he's pretty relatively young. Now, he didn't look great against Clemson. He had flashes like he usually does. I think that's the big question mark is the Quinn Ewers question mark. Like, hey, does he come out? Could he be a second round guy? Like many aren't saying he's a first round guy. Something he's a day 3 guy. He's all across the board there. But to me, the real wild card in this bad boy is Jalen Milroe, because I think from a fantasy perspective of his rushing upside, and I think some landing spots make a lot of sense. Like I love Milroe to the Browns in the second round. Like if they did that weird thing though, where they said Deshaun Watson was still a good quarterback. I don't know if anybody saw that. I don't know what the hell they're doing there. They posted this thing. So they might not lean quarterback, but I will say like, just from a perspective of like, hey, I like this kid. Jalen Milroe to me gives me upside from a dynasty perspective. If he comes out and he gets second round capital, then you might bump this grade up a little bit, or maybe just sit there at that C because Aller didn't come back or whatever. Nothing too exciting here in this group, but that upside from a rushing standpoint is the one thing I like.
Yeah, I agree. He looks decent on the model. He hits a lot more metrics sometimes than the Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, especially the rushing metrics. He crushed those.
Yeah.
So that's nice. And the other one I'd mention is Jackson Dart. He actually looks from an analytical perspective, numbers perspectives, he looks good. But then you have the film guys and the people that are actually going to draft him, and I'm not sure he really gets that first round draft capital, but numbers wise, the stuff that I think is important from a QB perspective, QBR, EPA per play, adjusted yards per attempt, that kind of stuff, Jackson Dart is done really well. And actually from a full out data perspective looks good. I just don't see him as a first round quarterback. That may change. But right now, if he's not going to get the first round draft capital, I'm not going to be that high on him. I might be the highest in the Devy Royale on him, but that's not saying much. So
A to Z sports guy, Travis May loves this guy. That Travis May's guy is Jackson Dart. The data nerds love Jackson Dart.
It's data
nerds is all the data there. All right, let's go to the running back class, because when you look at the running back class, this is probably the strength of the class, right? So we graded it out at A-, and when you look at it, we try to identify the top guys of the class. We put on here, and I'm not really a mathematician, but 10 guys here that were like, yeah, we can see these 10 guys really doing pretty well. At the top of the board, you got Ashton Genty, obviously. But then we had Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Singleton, Amarian Hampton, Dylan Sampson, Caleb Johnson, Jordan James, Jonah Coleman, and Devin Neal. Now, some of these guys it's been confirmed that they've been going back. I think Jonah Coleman just confirmed it right before we came on and did this. Caleb's coming out. Dylan Sampson's still up in the air. But I think the guy, now we've all talked about Ashton Genty a million times, and we're going to get into it. I think, he is 101 or 102. He's in that tier. I wrote about him in our Substack. We've talked him on the show and rookie drafts and all of that. But the one guy I want to give his flowers to, because you and me, we never gave up hope, Jay. And you watched it last night in person. What can we say about our boy Travion Henderson? Because last night in the playoff against Tennessee, as we're going to record this, 10 carries and only 80 yards, but 2 touchdowns. He also had 54 yards receiving, and he has looked solid this year. 800 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns. But the most important thing is he's been healthy, and I got a lot of shit for putting him in my top 5 big board when I first put it out last month or whatever it was. And you know what? I'm vindicated, because I think he's still a top 5 talent, if not top 3. And I think I had him at running back 3, right behind Amarian Hampton. I think he could be one of the more talented backs in this class. And I think that's where the depth comes from, because a lot of these guys you could say that about. But to me, Travion Henderson, he's a 3-down guy. And I just want, it just sucks because I hate that team so much. I still want him to succeed, though. So I'm hoping he puts up like 200 against Oregon, but then they lose somehow, just so I can see that draft capital just get higher and higher, because I fully believe Travion Henderson's a stud. I think he's a 3-down guy. You saw it there in person when you went to the game. But we've seen it in his career. When he's healthy, he's explosive.
It's explosive when you're watching it in person. I've seen a few games. At freshman year, it was something special. And we're really seeing down here at the home stretch that, Travion Henderson is a special player. And I think from a numbers perspective, we're going to get caught up because Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State shared a workload this season. It doesn't happen at the running back position very often. And so when you look at all these metrics, all these age-adjusted metrics, it doesn't show up that great because they truly did share the entire workload the whole year. And so from that perspective, like this may be one of those years where we see an exception at the running back, a teammate exception at the running back place, and we can make that exception, and it's justifiable in terms of looking at the data. And so I'm super high on Travion Henderson. I'm so excited that we got the guy that we saw that freshman year is starting to play that way. And I think all the NFL evaluators are sort of salivating on what he can do, especially catching the ball in the backfield. I think what he did last night doing that is something that's really special and will carry over and be translatable for the NFL. So I'm really excited. And to put another point here, these values that we have here, that's a combined rankings of all the guys that we have at the WRL doing rankings, so that you're getting Kevin, myself, Christian, a few other guys' numbers all sort of mashed in here together. So, but I would say in this class, we're showing 10 running backs. There's even a ton more here below this line. But I would just say that there's so much depth in this class that I'm excited about this running back class. The only thing I'm really, really hoping for is that we get five, six, 7 guys that get day 2 or better draft capital.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it happens, but I think that in the way that I work my models, I'm really hoping that when it comes draft time, that the evaluators see that this is a really good running back class, and there's not that many outstanding players in this year's draft, offense, defense, whatever. But this running back class, I think, is a really, really good, really depth-wise, has a really good running back class. And I think it could change the dynasty landscape in the NFL in terms of running backs. If you get enough of these guys landing in good spots where they can sort of take over running back position groups, and the right guys in the right places, this is a really good class for that, if that happens.
Yeah, I went on a pod and they were asking me about like how many running backs I think can go day 1, day 2. I said 7, and even they kind of were shocked by that because they're like, that's a lot. And I said, I know, but I think it could be. I mean, so I'm going to say 7. Put it in the comments though. If you're watching on YouTube, what do you think? How many running backs do you think of this goes, in that range? Because I do think it could be there. And we go even deeper here. Ollie Gordon's still out there, man. I get some hate when I don't rank Ollie Gordon in the top 5, man. You guys love you some Ollie Gordon. DJ Giddens is out there, one of my favorites. Okay, Damian Martinez, Le'Veon Moss probably going back to school. Woody Marks is coming out. He's one of those sleeper guys, little older prospect. Raheem Sanders bounced back at South Carolina this year. There's a guy that name, if you haven't really dived into it, is a name you should probably go look at. Jaquez Hunter, he was one of the best just with Dylan Sampson in the SEC this year as a runner. Phil Maffa from Clemson. We can keep going through them. There's a lot. But of this group, I know you like Ollie. I know we've talked about Woody Marks before, Raheem Sanders. But this group, you're leaning on Ollie. You think Ollie can kind of separate himself?
Yeah, so I think Ollie is in that same group with like Nick Singleton, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. Last year, he had an amazing season, and I think a lot of times we forget, what happened. It happens with a lot of guys. They do it in their year 1, year 2, then they have a down year, and everybody sort of forgets what that player did. And I think the data supports that, but the problem that happens is when you have a guy like this that jumps on the data, but then you have the film guys, the Kevins, the Christians saying, "Oh, I don't really see it." That is the cause. That's the caution flag. That's the cause for concern. So, like, I had guys like Sean Tucker who like crushed on all the data, and then hearing Kevin and Christian say, I'm not really sure about that. And then, you know what happened to him in the draft. Doesn't mean he's not going to end up,
Yeah.
providing some value in the NFL at some point or whatnot. Not the case. But what I'm really looking for is that differentiated production. And given what all he's done so far in college, I think that he could get to that level, especially if he gets that third round draft capital, which I really hope he does. I think he could be one of those guys that can produce at the NFL level. So that's kind of where I see him. I'm probably a little high on him relative to where you guys are, but that's one where I really do need the draft capital to confirm it, given the fact that you guys are so iffy on him.
Yeah, I didn't go back. I need to go back. I'm gonna go back and look again and just see, because I mean,
Well,
again,
watch last year's tape. Watch last year's tape.
I think you have to watch both years' tape, because I do think that you have to have nuance in between both of them. And I want to say, like, and I've watched this year's and I've watched it more, but I want to go into it because the numbers do tell you a story. Like, so this is part of the process. Looking at Jay's and the numbers and kind of going through and say, hey, this kid's popping. Okay, let me go back on film and see, am I missing something too? And this is the part of the process in December that you start doing here, and you're wondering here, because we have missed. Kyron Williams is a guy that we're like, man, he ran that 40. We're like, this guy, oh my God. Now he's a running back one. Like, he's just been that in fantasy. So you're just like, oh yeah, I missed on that process in terms of like, what did I miss on the tape? So that's part of it as well. Now, as far as the wide receivers go, so, when you're looking at the wide receiver grades overall and kind of going through these guys, Tet McMillan is the top. And then Luther Burden, so sitting there at 91.5 and 91. And some people will be shocked that Luther Burden for us is really close in terms of that value. Emeka Egbuka, Isaiah Bond. I will say Travis Hunter is a top 2 talent if he was just a wide receiver. So don't get mad at the value. That's what depreciates that value there. Okay. Evan Stewart's still sitting in there. Antonio Williams from Clemson, Kyron Lacey, Tej Johnson, Trey Harris. And again, this is kind of the mashup of the rankings. This isn't necessarily our rankings. I know Christian's going to have a video too pretty soon about his 2025 rankings. Really the big thing for me is it's Tet or no one right at the top, right? If you're not getting Tet, there is a tier there. But the guy that, I keep going back and forth on, this is what I want to ask you this question, because I got yelled at on YouTube about this. Luther Burden or Rome Odunze? Who is a better prospect for you?
Luther Burden.
Okay, so I said that same thing, Jay, and I got yelled at. Why? So, but I said, hey, Luther Burden, he was an early breakout, dominator rating, everything that you like to see from an early anything in terms of metrics, you like that. Rome had one great year with Michael Penix Jr., not taking away from him, but to me, Luther Burden was the better prospect. Am I right about that?
1,000%. Couldn't agree more. And the process is the process, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. But what we're doing is the process is to try and increase your probability of hits. And Luther Burden, yes, this year wasn't perfect. We would have loved to have seen another outperformance year, but year 2 was really, really good. And really, it comes down to, I want to have as early as possible draft capital. Especially day 2 or better. I want to be an early declare, and I want to have production that happens earlier rather than later. So I want to weight all of those things more. It helps if you're athletic. It helps if you fit size profiles. It helps if you can do something special from a data perspective. But really, Luther Burden we saw what we need to see in year 2 from a data perspective. If he goes first round, so high on Luther Burden at this point. When you're just looking at the numbers, I had 2 tier 1 wide receivers last year, 2 tier 2 wide receivers last year. Rome Odunze was in my tier 2, but he was at the very bottom of tier 2. Luther Burden's like a mid to upper end tier 2 guy. When I started the season, I had Luther Burden at the end of tier 1 with Tet McMillan. I thought they were interchangeable. At some points, I had Luther Burden ranked above Tet McMillan. Coming into this season. This season, I think it put a gap between the two, because Tet just proved it again another year. And Luther, like, there's stuff that you can see when you watch the player, but there's so many games where it wasn't coming together, and he didn't get as much production as you'd like to see for somebody that's going to go in the first round. But still, we saw the early production. He's going to be an early declare. He's going to go very early in the draft. So, the production the ability that he has could offer you differentiated fantasy points. This is a guy that if he does hit his ceiling, we're talking like very high end wide receiver fantasy points, because he can do so many different things on the field.
Yeah, no, that's where I'm at too. Now, we graded this class a B plus ish. Like, I had B minus, Jay had kind of in that B plus range. I think that it could hit a ceiling. I mean, it really comes down to really Travis Hunter. I think Evan Stewart goes back to school. I think Antonio Williams goes back to school. I think, when you're looking at this group as a whole, I think Isaiah Bond goes back to school. So right now we're just predicting like who could come out. So if we start seeing that dip a little bit, then you're still going to start seeing these kind of the grades go down. Outside of those guys, I'm not going to read the whole list. Alec Aomaner from Stanford is a guy that a lot of people like. We don't necessarily love him here, but he's in that area. Xavier Restropo from Miami, he's in that area too. Ja'Cory Brooks from Louisville, I've seen some very high stats on him. And I'm going to shout out Jake because this kid, I watched him in the playoff, and they might not have had a great playoff at Indiana, but Elijah Surratt, wide receiver Surratt out of Indiana, he is solid too. So and when you go through this list, the funny thing about if you're going to go through this whole list, so if you're watching YouTube, you can see it on the podcast. Sorry, I can't list every single guy, but like Ricky White, Jordan Tyson, like a lot of these guys are very good special teamers. Ricky White is an all-pro special teamer possibility. Like he's a guy that's going to be out there for that. A lot of slot guys in this. So we're going to see what the testing tells us. The testing is going to tell us the real grade here for a lot of these guys, but I'm cautiously pessimistic about some of these guys. I think that you're going to see a lot of day 3 guys, which doesn't bode very well there, because I think the running backs is where the value is in this class.
Yeah, like I said, that running back class is really awesome. And, like we said, Travis Hunter might determine how this class goes. I'm really high on Travis Hunter. I was not surprised. I was surprised by how high I was. When I just got through the data model, I have him as slightly above Emeka Buka, which I've been a Emeka Buka stand for a long time. Whether you rank Travis Hunter or Emeka Buka 3 or 4, it doesn't matter. But those top 4, Tet, Luther, Travis Hunter, and Emeka. If Travis Hunter ends up being a wide receiver and they actually play him as a wide receiver, that's an interesting top 4. The problem is after that, there's just a bunch of question marks, as the way I see it. There's some guys that I like, some guys that I'm like, maybe that might work, whatever. Need to see a lot of these guys get draft capital, but really there's not much depth. And especially if you take Travis Hunter out of the group, then you're talking about 3 guys that you're excited about. But yeah, there's definitely guys in this list, in the second group of list players that are interesting, that stand out. Like Elick is one that like I tried my hardest to knock him down, but like the data just proves like he's had 2 pretty good years.
Yeah.
If you're looking at all those metrics, reception yards per team, pass pen, EPA per play, it looks pretty decent. He's going to be early declare. This is a decent profile. So I understand, like, hopefully that draft cash will just push it down so I can push him down a little bit more. But there's some nuggets in here. There's some nuggets in this class. Just, I would say, a very top heavy class from this group. So
yeah, there's always nuggets. There's always those guys out there that we talk about. All right, let's wrap up the 25 class. Tight end grades. This is a very solid grade here. A- for us. Top 3 guys in that top tier here. Colston Loveland, 83.3. Tyler Warren, 82.7. And Inherit Faded Jr. from Bowling Green. That's a kid that you want to go watch. A little light, 230-ish. We'll see where he comes in terms of his strength there. We still have Colston Loveland as tight end 1. I still have him as tight end 1 as well. I don't think that's going to change for me throughout the process. I do think we talked about this before in the draft podcast. I think Loveland's going to have a hell of a RAS score. I think that his relative athletic score that he puts up in the combine is going to push him up higher as well. So we have a pretty high value there. And then when you're going through all of them, there's a lot of tight ends in this class. So, I mean, I have probably a lot of these guys probably going to go back to school or not, but a guy like Luke Lachey, who's done nothing at Iowa this year, but he's an Iowa tight end. So we put him on the list because he can definitely perform. Mason Taylor came out from LSU, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, Gunnar Helm from Texas, Aronde Gadsden from Syracuse, Jake Brittingstool from Clemson. The list goes on and on. I will say the one guy that I love, and he's an athlete, is Mason Taylor from LSU. He's going to be the guy I'm higher on probably throughout the process. He's a guy that everybody should watch. But there's some value in this tight end class. The thing that I go back and forth on with this group is I hear all the time, oh man, this is a great fantasy class. I don't know how good of a fantasy class it is or how great of an NFL tight end class it is. And that's always the thing that we navigate the most when it comes to the tight end position. But some values in here and a lot of fun overall at the top of the class.
Yeah, I think Colston Loveland should be a lock for tight end 1. I understand Tyler Warren's really good, but man, his profile, Colston Loveland's profile is really good. It's on the fringe of getting up to tier 1. It's that good. When you throw it up there with Brock Bowers, throw it up with the Kyle Pitts, throw it up there with TJ Hawkinson, all guys that have done really well in college. that's the type of profile you're getting from Colston Loveland. And Tyler Warren had an amazing season, but he's a 5th-year guy, so he did basically nothing until year 5. So like I get that both those guys will probably be pretty good NFL tight ends, but the profile that I want to bet on is Colston Loveland's profile because it looks really, really good. And then the other two ones that I'm really interested in are Harold Fountain Jr. and Mason Taylor. Mason Taylor is, like you said, a guy that I'm getting excited about. His profile
on the boat, baby.
looks really, really good. The other one that I'd kind of like put lump in there that nobody's talking about, and I'm not even sure if he's going to come out, is Jack Velling. So that would be one other one that I'd just maybe call out as something that might be interesting, but he may or may not come out.
Yeah, and then when you look at the pick value overall, and I'll run through this quick, these are not like, so I always get comments like, no one's trading this for straight up. These are where they're getting valued based on a couple different sites, Fantasy Calc, Dynasty Daddy, Keep Trade Cut, of guys kind of being around 25 pick values. I went heavy high, though, like not low guys, because there's guys like all across the board that maybe you could grab, you know, for the stretch run right now or whatever. But here's some 25 pick values: AJ Brown, Breece Hall, Trey McBride, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., a lot of wide receivers in this group here. Now, and here's how I look at it. If I'm not getting Genty or Tet, I probably take pretty close to everybody on this list, except for maybe AJ Brown. Like that might be the only one just because of age, but still production wise, I think you can make the argument AJ Brown's going to do that for the next 2 to 3 years, and you're kind of buying in there. So that's kind of how I value the 25 first values, where if I can get any of these guys, if I'm missing out on Tet or Genty, I'm okay trading for these guys. Are you the same?
Same. This is a small tier 1 in this draft. It's Genty and Tet. Those are the locks as I see it. Last year we had 5 tier 1s, and this year we have 2. So it's not, like I said, it's not this year. I'm not gonna try and really fight for those mid firsts. It's got to be 1.01 or 1.02, unless you're seeing the quarterbacks go at 1.0, 1.2, which I wouldn't advocate for. We're doing mock drafts where you're seeing them at 3 and 4. 1 and 2, those Ashton Genty and Tet McMillan, those are the guys I hold on to. The rest of the guys, the rest of this draft, I'm willing to move around. I'm willing to go grab that veteran. A lot of these guys on this list are very interesting and more like assured to give you fantasy points now than the lottery pick, the picks that you get when you select one of these guys that may or may not do it, even though we have a certain probability of them doing it.
All right, let's dive in. We're going deep. So we're going to talk about the 26 class. This is the fun groups as we go through. Actually, this class is not that fun. There is some, it's incomplete. It's very incomplete right now, depending on who returns. But as a whole, right now, here's where we kind of have this group. Now, if Drew Aller comes out back to school, like we said, that's going to balloon the class up. But here's our top 3. And really, it's kind of, we might be missing a couple of these guys. So Arch Manning sitting there at QB1 at Texas. He's kind of the drool of the class. Like that's going to bump up that A- grade, especially if Drew Aller comes back. You're probably looking at A to A+ in that range. Nico is at Tennessee, but he has not looked great against good teams. He looked bad against Ohio State in their playoff game. He's got to really develop. Garrett Nussmeier from LSU is sitting there at 66.5. And then there's some guys in the fringe. Jackson Arnold just transferred to Auburn. Lenore Sellers, South Carolina. A lot of guys love Sellers. They think he is an NFL guy. He is explosive. He is fun to watch from a running perspective. I do think he needs to develop as a passer, but he's out there. Dante Moore hasn't played for Oregon yet, but he's out there. Sam Leavitt, Arizona State. They got to buy. They're a top 4 team in the playoff. He's their quarterback. Miller Moss going to Louisville. Eli Holstein from Pittsburgh. You're looking at Connor Wiegman, Houston. You're looking at all these other guys here. Marcel Reed, I know he's getting a little buzz there, but what's your take on the 26 class as a whole, as a quarterbacks?
I like this class, especially we got to assume that Drew Aller is probably in this class now. And maybe let's say Jalen Milroe comes in this class too. Now, the question I think that will drive a lot of this class is Arch going to stay for his 4th year, or is Arch going to come out as the early declare 3rd year? And what I've seen so far from Arch this year, this is the crown jewel. This is the quarterback that you want in Devy. Is Arch Manning, because this was an incredible year. He came in when Quinn Ewers was injured. And, if you look at the QBR, the EPA per play, the adjusted yards per attempt, all that stuff, he's crushing it. He even can run the ball. He got a different gene. He got a different gene than Peyton and Eli. So, I'm really super excited for Arch Manning. That's the guy that I want in the Devy QB circles. There's a 2027 quarterback that people are excited about as well. But for me, it's Arch for 1.01.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think that will he come back is the biggest question of it all. Like, is he? I think it's just going to come how Texas goes. Like, how does Texas go and how do they play there? And I think, like, hey, does he get over those 20 starts? Because I know that his dad and his uncles have talked about having enough experience, having over 20 starts. It's going to be close next year. And I think it's really just going to come down to kind of how they play and how that kind of plays out in the SEC too. I mean, he could be there. Now, the one thing that happens if Arch does, go back to school and go to 27, Drew coming out possibly will help this class a little bit. But I will say, but if Arch isn't in this group, that does decimate the QB group a little bit because there's a lot of unknowns. Like Lenorse is out there. Some of these other guys, Sam Levitt could be a guy that kind of pops up in there. But still, a lot of unknowns coming back there. Now, after this, it gets a little so the running back grade. So we had Jeremiah Love as running back 1 before a lot of people did. Out of Notre Dame, we have him as our high one right now at 77 trade value. Then it's a lot of unknowns. So CJ Baxter out of Texas tore his ACL. Justice Haynes is in the portal as of right now. Darius Taylor should be a top 5 guy out of Minnesota. Trevor Etienne is probably going back to school. He could come out in 25, but we put him in 26 because I do think he's gonna do that. Same with Jay Knott. Deshaun Bishop is out there. Jamarian Miller is out there. Katron Allen is out there. Jaden Blue looked explosive. He's out there as well. And then some other guys. Quentin Joyner going to Texas Tech. Mark Fletcher, Dante Dowdle, Caleb Jackson. Ooh, RIP all the Caleb Jackson shareholders out there. Like that hurts. Sama from Iowa State, Roderick Robinson, Cameron Seldon, Richard Young. So a lot of you guys might be like, who? That's the problem with the running back class of the 26 class, because really where I see it right now is Love, question mark with Baxter, question mark with Haynes, even though I know he's talented and it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. And then really Darius Taylor. Like those two guys I like. The other two are very, very big question marks. And I don't see I think that's a tier. It's really a tier with Love and then after, but really we give it a B because there is depth there. But I could see this easily being one of the, not the worst running back classes, because it's never say that because people pop off all the time. But I do think that it's very not top heavy again. So now you're going back to where it's like, now some of those 25 guys might go back to school. It might shake things up. But as it sits right now, it's a very incomplete class.
Yeah, I agree. And I echo those same sentiments. Jeremiah Love and Darius Taylor look like the best 2 of this class right now. And then CJ Baxter is an unknown. And we were very high on CJ Baxter, but you get an injury and you just don't know how that shakes out. And, even if he is coming back next year, will he need 2 years before he can start putting up the production again? I'm not sure, but you got to produce before you can go and be a high NFL draft pick. So I guess you just need to see it. We're still holding out hope there for the talent. And Justin Hayes is just went in the portal. I mean, there's so much talent there, but you don't know what the situation is going to be, and you just hope it works out. But yeah, I think overall pretty incomplete. Jay Knott and Trevor Etienne give this class some depth that you can maybe lump Katron Allen and Jaden Blue in there. And there's some depth there. There's some players that have done something in college that are interesting that could pop off. Jaden, especially AJ Knott, his first couple of years were really great. I'm not sure what happened this year, but the first couple of years were really great. So, there's some interesting guys in here, but really a lot of question marks behind Jeremiah Love and Darius Taylor. Those are the guys I'm pretty confident in.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, if you want to get to grossness, let's get to the wide receiver class, the 2026 wide receiver class. Now, when you're looking at overall, we are easy graders-ish. I would say it's a B- right now-ish, probably in the C range once we kind of figure out kind of where these assets go. There is so many unknowns. Now, if you're watching, you'll see the portal is on a lot of these guys' lists right now. And going through it right now, they have not landed here. So Carnell Tate is our 1 at Ohio State, 87.8 TDR value. I still think Carnell Tate is a value, and I like Carnell Tate. But if he's your wide receiver one in a class right now, based on what like Jeremiah Smith and some of those other guys are doing at Ohio State, the true freshmen, that makes me nervous. Eugene Wilson was injured last year, so I cannot dock Eugene Wilson for just being injured his sophomore year after having a really good freshman breakout year. Then it gets weird. Kevin Concepcion in the portal. He's okay. Dane Key. If he goes to Georgia, I'm done. I'm quitting the format altogether. But now I think he's a great wide receiver. Zachariah Branch, he's been visiting some places, Georgia, Arizona State. He's out there. Jonte Cook, he can't find a home. He keeps subtweeting Dion on Instagram. Man cannot get out of his own way. Makai Lemon is out there. Maybe has a golden opportunity now because no one's left at USC. They lost everybody. Deuce Robinson, Zachariah Branch. They lost all these guys. Matthew Golden we have in this class, but he could come out in 25. Barian Brown, he went to LSU. Don't necessarily love that spot. I guess it's okay. Eric Singleton Jr., same thing. Still in the portal here. And then when you get into some of the other guys, the problem is some of these guys just haven't broke out. Kendrick Law, Brandon Ennis, Deuce Robinson. He's at Florida State now. He just announced it. J.C. Brown, Jacoby Lane. Aaron Anderson. I like Aaron Anderson. He's a value. Absolutely love the kid. But LSU just grabbed 2 more portal wide receivers, and I'm like, damn it. Where's the production going to come from there? Don't love this class. Like I'm not a big fan of the 26 class altogether outside the quarterbacks anyway. But this is disgusting, Jay.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just you haven't seen the production, the high draft capital projections from a lot of these guys. So Dane Key is somebody that's really interesting to me because he had a really good season, and I was hoping that he came out because he would be one of those guys that I'd have high in my data process, but goes back to, and you just don't know what's going to happen the next year. And obviously he was not, if he was portaling, if he was transferring, then he maybe didn't get the feedback from the NFL that he was hoping to get throughout this year. Just kind of disappointing because if you look at this list, there's a lot of talent in here. There's a lot of resources put into Devy resources, campus to Canton resources put into this group of players, and there's a lot of talent here. It just hasn't really panned out the way you'd like to see it. There are definitely some nuggets, and a few of these guys could definitely pop off. There's a lot of guys, even on the second page. There's a lot of guys here like Brandon Ennis. When Emeka Egbuka goes off to the NFL next year, Brandon Ennis is going to step into his shoes, and that's a one guy that I have my eye on. And there's lots of guys in here that are pretty interesting. But I guess as if I'm looking at this class, I'm not as excited about this one as I am about the 2027 one, or maybe even the 2025 one the year prior.
This is probably one of the worst wide receiver classes I've seen in a long time, right? Wouldn't you say? Because since we've been doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that they haven't produced very much.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So usually you have a separator. So usually when you look at college prospects, obviously traits and tools are great. Like you see those, you're like, oh yeah, this kid's going to do it. But at some point you're like, okay, where's that production at? Zachariah Branch has been explosive. The production I've been there. Probably Concepcion, right? I would say Concepcion's probably the one that has the most production, or is it?
Well, it's probably Concepcion, but like Dane Key as a percentage of the offense has probably done better. Carnell Tate, we've seen a little bit of it, but he just gets overshadowed by the rest of the guys on the team. So like he has 1 or 2 spike games, but I guess what you'd hope is that Carnell Tate has a few more spike games because we have him here at the top. I think he probably could be the top wide receiver. It's just weird because we haven't seen quite the type of production that you'd love to see from a sophomore wide receiver at Ohio State.
Yeah, I would say, I guess Singleton probably.
Yeah, Singleton Jr. From a data perspective looks really good too. So Dane Key, Singleton. There's a little bit of Matthew Golden as well, but yeah.
Two big years for Singleton. Well, big. I put quotation marks for those. That's another play. 700 yards in both seasons. He's had 6 touchdowns and 3 touchdowns in both those years, and just around average about 52 catches a year. Now, if he goes somewhere great, awesome. Like, I think that, hey, he could add that production. You like it. But the problem is a lot of these guys are the same guy, too, like 5'11, 190. Like, that's all they are, too. So it's like hard for that. There's not a lot of separation between their profiles. And that's why I get very nervous about the 26 picks. That's why, like, as we get into the values later, I don't mind moving a lot of these 26 picks unless I'm a quarterback needy, unless I think that team is like, oh my God, like I really need that quarterback, or I think it's going to be early pick. Cause I do think with Arch sitting out there with that carrot, it's hard to kind of move off those picks right now for that. Now, tight ends. As you get lower into the groups, what you're going to find is the tight ends it just gets a little iffy here. So Luke Haas, he transferred to Ole Miss, and that always worries me because tight ends just disappeared at Ole Miss. That was Jay's guy. Lawson Lucky at Georgia. Andrew Raplia at Penn State. We just put Penn State tight ends in the top 3 because and Georgia tight ends too. Now, there are some in the 25 class I do think will come back to school that is going to kind of shape out this group a little bit. But in the other guys out here, Sadiq from Oregon looks really good.
Sadiq.
Yeah. Kenyon Sadiq might be a little higher. Maybe we should have put him in that next tier up there. Max Clare from Purdue, obviously, but I think he transferred out. I'm not 100% sure on Max Clare. And then some other guys in there. I don't love necessarily a lot of them, to be honest with you. So really it's Sadiq right now. Clara's look good, Haas, and that's really it. And whether the 25 guys come back into this class and make it up, we have a B-, but probably is around a C+ as well, somewhere in that grade.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I was just super high on Luke Haas, and if you actually look at the data, it really wasn't that bad from a market share perspective, but it just didn't hit this year. So my hope is you get a transfer, you get to play with in a new system and a new QB, and you go off and he looked good last year, so I'm excited. I hope he has a better season next year. But yeah, the other one, Kenyon Sadiq, that's the one I'm really excited about as well. So if you get one or two other guys, it's just hard at this point. You're taking stabs in the dark here at the tight end positions at early. That's why we advocate that you don't draft tight ends in the Devy format, and you don't want to draft it with high draft capital. You rather play in the wide receiver, running back range for most of the stuff. And so, like each year we're going to have a whole bunch of tight ends that are going to go to the NFL and do something, right? But it's really hard until you get the draft capital and the athleticism grades, because usually in college systems, you don't have tight ends producing all that much. Just very rarely do you see a Brock Bowers year in and year out. No. It's mostly lower tier type of plays for the tight end. And so, not an incredibly great class, but there are some players that could pop off and get in the mix here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with Sadiq, I think the big thing with him, Kenyon Sadiq's out of Oregon, 6'3", 245. I think the big thing, he had 2 touchdowns against Penn State in the Big Ten championship. So we saw that. I think if Terrence Ferguson does move on in 2025, which I think he has to, because I think he aged out. You have Kenyon there. He can see some production. Like, you're looking at it like, hey, okay, so we see that. But yeah, again, don't be touching tight ends. Don't go after tight ends there. As far as pick values, these are fun conversations here. So always goes down a little bit of a tier here. So in 2026 draft pick value out there right now, Ladd McConkey, Kyron Williams, Rashee Rice, George Pickens, T. Higgins, Rome Odunze. So a very wide range of values here in this group. Now, I don't mind drafting. So the way I look at it here is, where would I plug in Ladd in this wide receiver class? He'd be 1, right? He'd be wide receiver 1 for me in the class as a whole. So if I do need a wide receiver, I'm okay there. Kyron with a 26 pick makes me a little nervous. Like, he's been a running back 1, but if you're continuing going for it right now, the next week or whatever, but moving forward, I'm not buying any running backs with any first. That's just not what I do. That's just not how I'm going to address that. But then you got Rashee and George and T and Rome. I know you would definitely move a 26 first for T. You're that's there, and I would too. I think I question Rome a little bit, but would you move a 26 pick for all these wide receivers on this page? Maybe George?
Oh, I don't know.
It's close. These are
close. It depends on if I'm getting Arch and Drew Aller. If I can get Arch and Drew Aller, maybe Jeremiah Love and Darius Taylor, maybe Carnell Tate if he goes off. But that's basically kind of it. And then after that, I probably want to go for the production. But if I can get Arch, I probably want Arch. But other than that, I probably want the production.
Yeah, could you imagine trading George Pickens or getting George Pickens and the guy getting Arch Manning at the 101
I
or
could
102?
not. I
That's a
could
tough
not.
one. People live with
I
those
could not.
trades all the time. But I will say, like, I always range it like when I look at future picks too, like, okay, if I think Ladd can be a wide receiver 1-ish, like back in 1 or 2, and I'm sitting there and I have a very, very good team where I'm solid and I'm looking at it like, hey, I'm a contender here. I could really go get it, and it's going to be a late first, and it's hard to predict 26 first. It really is, and so you really got to be careful there. Ladd's a guy I comfortable in. Rasheed is also a guy for me that I'm very comfortable trading for. But I also don't mind taking a little risk there. I had someone tell me that Rasheed is going to be in jail for the next 6 to 8 years on YouTube. I don't know what you're talking about, but the biggest question mark is his knee, I think, is the biggest thing, and kind of with that and Xavier Worthy breakout. I think what we're seeing now with Worthy, like what's that going to come into play there? But I will take a guy tied to Patrick Mahomes in a Chiefs offense that's going to lose probably Kelsey. And has Worthy there. Give me Rasheed in that range too. So it's always interesting to see kind of where that value plays out. And I do think, and I got yelled, I didn't get yelled at, but I got told in Discord, they talked about like, hey, if you move in first, people are very reluctant to move first because now in dynasty leagues you have to pay for a full year. Like that's kind of how we're seeing things because there. So I do realize like it's not as easy just saying, hey, just move a first or go trade your first here. So you really need to be bought in, and this guy can be that guy. I think Ladd to me is that tier, and Rasheed too, and T obviously. Those three guys to me are like, yes, I don't mind moving 26 first. Everybody else here I'd be a little cautious about.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into 27. So let's talk about the 27 class, and then we're going to wrap this baby up. I love this class. The 27 class is one of my favorites, so I can't wait to see how it bites me in the ass. But right now, I really enjoy the group. So DJ Lagway is probably the number 1 QB out of Florida. He's looked good in his limited starts. Dylan Raiola, Nebraska, has looked good and bad at times as a freshman quarterback. Julian Sayin is still out there. He has not played for Ohio State, but I do think that he is a very talented quarterback. Well, he played a little bit. He's played.
Plays a little bit.
Yeah, he plays a little bit, but he hasn't started any of those games. Other guys in there, Damon Williams from Washington, Luke Croman-Hoke just transferred to Mississippi State. CJ Bailey is out there. Walker White is out there, who is, I think, in the portal too. It's so hard to keep track of these guys. So there's guys out there in this range in the 27 class. I think the 3 guys right here, of these 3, if I wanted to be hot takey, I think Julian Sayin could be the best. But we just haven't seen it yet. But I do think Lagway is definitely right now as QB1. I'm comfortable putting him there. But I think Sayin is getting slept on as well.
I do. We talked about it before. I mean, the OSU QB situation, you have Will Holler moving on, and you have Devin Brown, who's announced that he's in the transfer portal, but he's going to stick with the team. So that's been Ohio State's backup for the whole season now. And both Devin Brown and Julian Sayin were in this last playoff game. They both came in and played for a drive at the end of the game after Ohio State had won the game. What I'd say is advocate is you have Will Howard moving on, Devin Brown transferring out. It becomes Julian Sayin or Tevion St. Clair or transfer portal QB. So, and I think Julian Sayin is somebody that has a very good shot at being Ohio State's quarterback next year. So, Tevion St. Clair is good, but Julian Sayin's already been in the system once, already has some time experience in playing games at Ohio Stadium. So, if he can be the Ohio State QB, that is a really interesting QB and could rocket up some value. I do think our trade value for DJ Lagway is probably a little low right now. I think we're gonna have to bump him up because right now people are very, very excited about what DJ Lagway is. Not only that, college players are transferring from all over the country to come and play with DJ Lagway because of what his physical gifts are and what he's able to do. So I think Lagway, probably his trade value is probably a little low here. We'll probably have to bump him up, and that might bump this class up. But I think Julian Sayin, if I was putting money on who could increase the most in value, I think DJ Lagway has already increased quite a bit. I think Julian Sayin's the guy that if he really does get that starting position, could increase quite a bit in value. Maybe be a 2-year starter at Ohio State with all the weapons there. That's the guy that's interesting.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do think we probably need to bump that grade up a little bit. But I think a B is fine. For this grade, 27B, hey, still a lot of unknowns, but Sayin could be that guy where it bumps it up to an A. Like it could if he performs well enough.
Yeah.
All right, running backs. C+ here, probably the lower grade that we have here for this group. A lot of unknowns yet. We just haven't seen a lot of production out there. So the Quentin Martin from Penn State hasn't played yet as much as we'd hope. Nate Frazier has looked good, though. Like Nate Frazier sitting there at Georgia has shown that he is very good. Caden Durham, kind of a smaller back at LSU, has shown flashes. Jaden Boff from Florida, showing flashes. Taylor Tatum, same thing. Jared Gibson's got a little run this year because of injuries at Texas. James Peoples out there in Ohio State land, kind of been sitting behind some guys called Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, but I know he is talented as well. Adam Muhammad, Davion Goss, Cameron Davis. Also on the outside here, Jordan Lyle still out there, Duke Watson, Daniel Hill, Kawan Lacey, Isaac Brown is a guy that probably should be a little higher in our rankings there. Kevin Riley as well out of Alabama. Isaac Brown's at Louisville. Overall, this class could be very good. It kind of reminisces of this 25 class that we just talked about. There are some guys in here that could pop off. I think Martin could pop off and Nate Frazier being like very solid guys. And then you're looking at a very skill set guy. So C+ is a average grade, but I do think this could be the biggest riser of all the groups that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of guys that could, but even some of the guys that I'm really excited about. So like Jarek Gibson, you have CJ Baxter coming back, Jaden Blue coming back. It's going to be a tough. They take James Peoples. Let's say Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins leave. Ohio State hits the portal, and they bring in Justice Haynes or something like that. And then you have James Peoples sharing the load with Justice Haynes, who's a year older and maybe has tire potential or something like that. So I like James Peoples. I think he's good. I think he could be something interesting. But even the situations aren't really shaping up to be like I can pick some of these guys that are going to be really, really good. You have had some performers, but we're really high on Quentin Martin. We didn't really see much of him this year. No. And Penn State has a ton of production going to the top two guys, so you just didn't see very much. And Caden Durham had some moments this year, but it wasn't a full season. And there's been some moments by Jaden Baugh as well, but I don't know. I think there has been limited production, enough to be excited about, and enough to say that there could be potential here. But I haven't seen anything like Jeremiah Love, Darius Taylor level type stuff out of this class yet, and hopefully we get there. One more year of production, we start to see some of these guys step up and break away from the pack, but it's hard to differentiate is what I say in this group so far.
It's hard. I will say the guy that I like, Nate Frazier, a lot. So Georgia running back, 129 carries, 600 yards, 8 touchdowns this year. Has looked great at times, like when they've had to put him in there. Had some run against Texas in the SEC title game. I think he's going to have a hell of a playoff. I think as we watch him, Georgia's going to lean on their running back room quite a bit as Carson Beck's injured for the playoffs. So I think Nate Frazier is one of those guys to watch. He's a very, very solid back this year for them. Now, let's get into the class, the wide receiver grade. So this is the fun 2027 class here. This class is loaded. So just one of the best wide receivers like class I've seen in a long time, and production, not just potential. We've already seen the production here. So Jeremiah Smith would be a top 10 pick in NFL draft right now. So at Ohio State 2027, would he be wide receiver 1 over Tet? Would you put him at wide receiver 1?
Yes.
Okay.
I would probably waver a little bit about like the fact that you get to have Tet McMillan on your team next year. But no. Jeremiah Smith is probably the best college football prospect we've seen in a long time.
Yeah. And then you have Ryan Williams, who looked really good at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, fell off a little bit for Alabama, but he is still a stud. Ryan Wingo is very good out of Texas. TJ Moore bounced. You saw some TJ Moore life in the playoff. We love that. Out of Clemson, solid prospect. Cam Coleman out of Auburn, solid prospect. Mika Hudson at Texas Tech. He is now at Texas A&M. Very solid. Hasn't seen the production there, but that's the potential one. Then you have, Bryant Wesco has looked very good for Clemson as well. Perry Thompson, Nick Marsh, Malcolm Simmons. I mean, we can just keep going down the list too. JoJo Trader, Mylan Graham, Isaiah Bennett, Tank Hawkins, some of these other guys that necessarily they have that potential there. I think the thing that differentiates the 27 class is that usually we say, oh, these guys are going to be studs next year. We're going to see it. They're going to break out. That's what we've been doing with the 26 class. Then they don't, and you're like, they're left there holding the bag. This group is probably the most production I've seen from the wide receiver class in a long time as true freshmen. So if that's the case, then the potential is there and the upside's there. And that's what makes the 27 picks so valuable. And I think with the running back group, if you do see that bump up, I mean, these are more valuable. Remember all the 2023 pick value that everybody talked about. Oh my God, this is the class. This is the class. You're going to see this with 2027. There is no way I'd move in 2027 picks right now if I can in a league. Like, I'm trying to collect as many as I can. And a big reason why is because I want as many Jeremiah Smith shares as I can at 101 out there.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. If I could put an A+++ on this class, that's what I'd put on this. Yeah. this is the class, the wide receiver 2027 wide receiver class, and it really a large lot of that's largely stems from Jeremiah Smith just being such a walk. You do not see that as freshmen. What he's basically the best player in college football. I know, Ashton Dempsey, Travis Hunter. This is the best player in college football, I think, Jeremiah Smith right now. And so that just having that sort of lock at that position is really valuable. And what we saw from Ryan Williams this year, I think that fills up tier one really, really well. And I think there could be 3 or 4 other guys that can get into that top tier of wide receivers. Wide receiver, in Superflex, you usually take quarterbacks first. Quarterbacks are the most valuable position. We could have 4 or 5 wide receivers in this group that are trade at QB levels in Superflex level. That is not heard of. That is really, really special. And so I really am excited about that. I think there's a lot of potential in this class. I think that this is the area that you want to pay attention. And your point about trading the 2025 class or 2026 class for 2027 is incredibly valid. I think we have to think about those types of things. And if you can get the 2027 class, because it's 2 years out now, for any type of discount to the 2025 class, that you should probably be interested in that. If you're not getting Tet McMillan and not Luther Burden, and you can get into a random 2027 one that hopefully turns into the top end of that class, that is just incredible. That's how you dynasty. That's perfect. And so I that's the kind of stuff that I like. 2026 class as well. If you feel like you got a good team and you can trade the later 2026 classes, or you're on the clock and you can move to the 2027 class. If you're in the back end of the 2026 class, you can move to a random 2027 class. Those are the type of trades I think you should make, because this 2027 wide receiver class I think is pretty good. And we've said that before. Everybody looks out and looks far ahead, and it might not shape out to be that way. I get that. You can always have some skepticism, but I'm really excited about this class.
I love this class. And you know what? I have a hot take for you on this episode as we're wrapping it up. I think TJ Moore can move into wide receiver 2 pretty easily. I think he can. He is so good. And I know that, the production came a little late, but he bounced back and he looked great against a great Texas defense, had over 100 yards and a touchdown there. I think we're sleeping on TJ Moore. I mean, maybe not us, but I do think that there's a possibility where he bounces Ryan because of he's 6'3", 200. When you're looking at his profile, man, and his intangibles, his separation, his strength off the line, things that he can do, I think NFL teams are going to love TJ Moore. And I like Wingo and those guys, but I think Moore can move his way up there too. I think Moore, to me, there's so many, you can love all these guys. Nick Marsh from Michigan State. I hate Michigan State, but you can love what he does there too. There's a lot of fun pieces in this group. Not a ton of red flags for me in this class, except for Micah Hudson. Come on, Hudson. Let's do something at Texas A&M, please.
Yeah, look, you gotta hope that happens. But the 3 wide receivers at Auburn this year look really, really good. It's just the class has so much depth. If you can look at this group of 10 wide receivers and you're excited about all 10 of them, that doesn't happen in classes at one position group. All 10 of these guys we're excited about and are producing pretty decently. You mentioned Micah Hudson. And Micah Hudson, he's got just a tremendous amount of talent. So you just hope that at Texas A&M that converts into some production.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. And all right, let's wrap up the tight ends. We gave it a C because we don't know what the hell is going on with these guys. Trey'Dez Green is pretty much the only one out there. You have Caleb Odom, Elijah Lofton, some other guys in there, maybe Luke Reynolds from Penn State, Gavin Hoffman, we just mentioned the Iowa guys. Trey'Dez is the only one that's had any production out of any of these guys there. Caleb Odom just transferred. Lofton is still out there. You have anything a lot to say about
I like Trey'Dez Green. I like Odom. I like Nelson. It's just hard right now. That's just me kind of thinking about how I thought about these guys as freshmen, but it's just really hard right now to say anything definitively from a Devy perspective about these guys, any of them increasing in a tremendous amount of value. But the hope is that some of them hit. But I'm not, if I can get, something else for them, I'd be interested in something else at this point.
Yeah. Now let's wrap up the 27 pick value. So out of these groups, so Josh Jacobs out there, Sam Laporta, Jordan Addison, Chase Brown, JJ McCarthy, and Michael Penix Jr. What I did is I went out and went to Fantasy Calc and I looked at trades that have been completed, and I found like just trades that people have moved. Now these were all going for it in their dynasty league. So these are very time dependent deals that have been done here. But if you moved any of these guys for a 27 pick outside of JJ McCarthy, because I'm not giving up on JJ McCarthy.
That's right.
And it may be Laporta and tight end premium, but I do think with the weapons there, Laporta to me is not worth a 27 first with Jameson kind of popping off now, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Gibbs, these other guys in there. JJ is the only one on this list I'm not moving for a 27 first. Where are you at with this group?
Buy JJ McCarthy. That's what this list tells me. Okay. I've been high on buying JJ McCarthy. I write about it in the Dynasty Investor series. Anytime I have a chance to explain how you should do something, I say buy JJ McCarthy. That's the guy that I'm interested in there. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be you moving draft picks to get into 2027 class. You can move, veterans that. Yeah. In a situation in the season where you can sell for the guys that are going win now and grab those 27 picks if you can't get the 2026 and the 25 to work. But, we like 2027 picks. So that's even better of a thing to do. And the 2027 picks will probably increase in value more than any of the other picks as well. So, in terms of just grabbing value and letting it rise and increase over time, those are interesting. I'd say in my list, historically what I've done is if I go on the age curve, if I try and find the guys that have been around for a little bit while, those guys that are 28, 29, 30, and those are the guys that I prefer first to sell, not the JJ McCarthy, not the Michael Penix, even though I'm not like crazy high on Michael Penix. He's a super flex, he's a QB in super flex formats. So that the young guys are probably not the guys that I would probably want to gravitate towards. It's the Travis Kelce's, the Keenan Allens, the Derrick Henrys, the Joe Mixons. If you could sell any of those guys for the 2027 first, that's the group of players that I'm interested in getting those first for.
I don't mind selling a Sam Darnold. I know he's looked great this year, and I know that he's leading the Vikings. But if I can get 27 plus something for Sam Darnold, I do that depending on my roster build. Bryce is sitting out there, and I love Bryce. Everybody knows that I love Bryce, but he's a QB2 at best, and I think the value for a 27 first goes up the most, I think, there. So, there's some interesting QBs. QBs are always hard to kind of value there, but if you can get some of these veteran running backs like Jacobs off your roster, you do that. I think that's a value. Now, it's easier said than done. We're not sitting here trying to reinvent the wheel. We understand that it is hard to kind of move those guys. Right now is the best. Right before, if your Dynasty League doesn't have a trade deadline, though, you got one more week. You could offload a Derrick Henry or Josh Jacobs and some of these guys for a 27 first. And I think that's the way you do it.
Yeah. Yep. That's the right way to Dynasty.
All right, let's wrap it up. Here's our total grades. Trying to grade out the class. At 25 quarterback, we have C+, running back A-, wide receiver B+ ish with a little asterisk next to that one. Tight end A-. Then in the 26 class, we have QB A-, running back and wide receiver and tight end essentially all Bs. So you can tell we don't necessarily love that class that much, and a lot of incompletes. 27 class, we have QB at B, C+ running backs, but could be an A-. I mean, that group is talented. We just haven't seen the production side. Wide receiver balloons this class, though, way above anything else at that A+ mark. And then tight ends just to see because they're freshman tight ends. They're not Brock Bowers. That's essentially what that group is there. Any final thoughts on this grade or this kind of forecast or this try to kind of exercise, Jay?
Yeah, I love it. I hope that what we're trying to do is help you figure out okay, so in 2025, we got a bunch of running backs that are great. We got 4 wide receivers that are great and a couple tight ends that are awesome. In 2026, you hope that QB class could be really, really great because that'd be very interesting. But there's a lot of iffies everywhere else. But if that QB class, if Drew Aller and Arch Manning are in that QB class, that's pretty interesting. And then in 2027, we're telling you there's a really, really good wide receiver class. And so if you can navigate around that in terms of manage your fantasy team and what years you should expect to get what players or what you're trying to get, that kind of helps you kind of figure out, okay, well, in 2026, I should be trying to get that QB Though if I'm in need of a QB, that might be the year for that I can get a QB. Or maybe I go for a 2026. Maybe I go for a running back because in 2027 there's going to be so many wide receivers that I'm going to have at least one or two that I can get on my squad that'll be interesting. So if you can think 3 years out in terms of how you're making all those moves, hopefully this helps you kind of think through some of those prospects for how you can manage your team.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we do here. And we're just having some fun here. Like, no one else is doing this content. There's no one out there grading all these classes and going through it. So part of it is also to kind of guide you through some of what we know, help you kind of win some leagues, look at values as well, and just have some fun, right? Like, that's the whole point of this, kind of going through it. So we appreciate you guys. As always, let us know what you think in the comments. Try to be as respectful as possible. If you are going to make fun of somebody, you make fun of Jay. If you're on the podcast, listen to the podcast, leave us a review. We'd appreciate it if you can kind of, bump us up a little bit. We haven't had a couple reviews the last, couple months, but dive into us. I know you listen. I see the downloads. So come on, someone out there, leave us a review. It's over Christmas break. We all hope you guys have a fun holidays out there with your family. We appreciate everybody out there for the ride that we've been on. And yeah, we're going to get out of here before Jay shows me.
Go Bucks. Go Bucks.
So gross. All right. We'll check you guys in the next episode.